Happy Final Four Friday to you. Yes, Seth Harp from Harp on Sports in for Shane Matthews today here on this Friday edition of PodUp with Matthews in the morning. Joining me today throughout the course of the program, 1/2 hour from now, Kyle Crooks, the voice of Gator softball, Gator women's basketball, Gator soccer, you name it, jack of all trades. Kyle Crooks is going to join us, like I said, around a half hour from now as we look at the slate of Gator spring sports heading into this first weekend in April. So Kyle's going to swing by. Also, coming up here momentarily, Zac Blobner, former Florida Gator, current host of the J and Z show on WDAE in Tampa. He's going to be joining us momentarily to look at the weekend slate of activities. PodUp with Matthews in the morning, brought to you in part by YouTube. Your YouTube live question. You can fire that off courtesy of Quality Plumbing, residential and commercial plumbing services and emergency repair since 1984. Their name says it all. Also, you got text for us. File away courtesy of the Titan MRI hotline, Titan MRI text line. Also, of course, PodUp with Matthews in the morning, service of Meldon Law. Facebook Live questions, courtesy of Meldon Law, the only official injury and accident law firm partner of the Florida Gators. And of course, PodUp with Matthews in the morning, always coming to you live from the Crime Prevention Security System studios, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. All right. Ooh, baby, look, I got my Purdue shirt on. Zach, you'll like this. Found out, I was talking with my mom last night. My mom is a Purdue grad. 29 of my aunts, uncles, cousins, family members, Boilermakers, by far and away, the most attended college of any of my family. My alma mater, party of one. My sister, Butler, two, party of two. I know you're a Gator through and through, and I thank you for swinging on today. We'll look at the Final Four, both the men's and the women's. Of course, other things on the slate as well, as we have a little Gator, basketball. I got a Gator basketball question for you. But let's start off with Gator baseball first, because look, here we are, big series coming up this weekend because it's the worst team that they will play this year. The Missouri Tigers, at least inside of the SEC, they've struggled in midweek games. 6-3 in conference play. If there's a chance to sweep a series, it's this. And you and I have covered baseball for years. Sweeps are a luxury. Winning series are a necessity. But I want to start with the man that hits third in the lineup, Jack Caglione. And Zach, I am now to the point with him to say I have been covering the SEC for a couple decades. I have been covering baseball professionally, collegiately for 30 years. Jack Caglione is the most dominant Gator men's sports figure in his sport ever. You're a Gator. I know Tim Tebow was great. He won the Heisman, won a couple national titles. I know Joe Kim Noah and Corey Brewer won back-to-back titles. That's fantastic, and that's very nice. But we're not talking about titles here. We're talking about dominance. Jack Caglione, to me, Zac Blobner, is now what David Ortiz, as Barry Bonds were at the plate in their prime. Hi, nice to see you. Why don't you go down to first base? Because I'm not pitching to you anymore.
Yeah, I don't think that you're wrong in that, Seth. I think in terms of his dominance, it's awfully hard to rank a guy, though, without a title as the best, right? And I know that that's one of the big arguments we have, even in pro sports a lot of the times, is like, how do you rank guys that we know are uber talented that don't have the hardware, don't have the ring? And I think that's part of it with Cags, right? Like, you see his path, you see what he can be, not just in Gator sports, Seth, too, but like in the pros, right? Like, we're already fantasizing about his future as an MLB player. And I think that just speaks to his greatness. And I think one of the things, too, that you can kind of put into perspective is how fun it is when he's up. We talk about must-watch players in sports, like guys that you'll take time. If you're at the ballpark, right, and you're in line for a hot dog or a beer, you'll get out of line to go watch him at bat. And that just tells you how much of an impact he's making, not only, for what he does in the X's and O's portions of being a Gator, but just overall, because branding is so important in so many ways for these athletes as well. So I think Cags has an opportunity to be the guy you're talking about. I'm not ready to put him ahead of a Tim Tebow. Obviously, we're hoping UConn doesn't repeat because we're still thinking about the Noahs, the Horfords of the world. So I think that, he's got to win a championship to kind of ascend to that level. And as much as we're talking about it in the realm of just UF, it's impossible not to think about these guys' pro careers too, and just in baseball, right? Like we're watching Wyatt Langford right now start already. We know that Pete Alonso has been a home run king. So it's tough for me to put Cags there, but it's not crazy to say, okay, he's in the conversation and his runway right now is pretty damn, open in terms of getting to that point. So I think it's fun to have him in the chat. And then, if you want to put him at the top of the mountain or so, like that's okay. I think he's got it. Let's do this. I know you love Mount Rushmores. I think he's got a clear path to be on the Mount Rushmore at this point.
It's an inside joke because I told Zach it's one of the laziest things you can do in sports is Mount Rushmores of sports because they've been doing them since I was at college. I'm a long way from college now. I just look at him in his realm. Like Tebow wasn't a very good NFL quarterback, but was very great collegiately. So I just look at him collegiately, and when he steps to the plate, I'm not pitching to him. I don't care. I'm not walking him with the bases loaded up a run to tie a game. But if he comes to I'll give you an example, Zach. If I'm Missouri and I'm ahead 4-3 in the, I don't know, top of the ninth this weekend, I'm putting it first. I'm not letting him tie the game. Well, if the guy on deck hits a 2-run homer, you lose. Great. He's not doing it. He's not doing it to me. I'm not going to do. And, we talk about, well, he hasn't won a championship, neither Barry Bonds. So I just look at him. Everybody compares him to Shea Ohtani, and that's nice and that's cute. I just look at Jack Caglione now after what he did last weekend. There's certain guys in sports that when they get the ball, and I guess, Zach, now certain women in sports now, when they get the ball, you look at them or they get in that opportunity. It's like an inevitable part in a movie that you've seen 100 times. You're like, well, here it comes. And when Caitlin Clark shoots in an important situation, you expect it to go in. When Jack Caglione comes to the plate, nobody's thinking weak ground out to third base. They're like, you're getting a home run. David Ortiz. So I put Jack Caglione, and Tim Tebow was amazing. He won, one is a starter, right? One is that hybrid Cordell Stewart, whatever you want to call him, back. And of course, he won the Heisman a year that Florida went 8-5, which is still really bizarre and strange when you think about it. A quarterback, what do you have, 50 touchdowns that year? So I look at it in terms of dominance. And look, I'll admit I wasn't privy to watching everything in the 60s and 70s. And I know there's some guys that tug heartstrings in there. I just look at what I've seen. That little boy in the 80s and beyond, even because Emmett was more of a pro than he was a collegiate guy. Like Tom Brady, a better pro than he was at Michigan. And to me, where we are now, Jack Caglione is the most dominant, not the best, the most dominant Gator male sports figure ever in his particular sport. So,
yeah. I like it. Like I said, there's a viable argument there, and it's only going to grow. That's the good news for you. It's like if we have this chat in 3 months, it'll only make your case stronger.
He's not going to hit 260.
Good stock to buy, Seth. Good stock.
There you go. I'm really going on a limb there, aren't they? Hot Take Friday. All right. He is Zac Blobner, a former Florida Gator, host of the J&Z show WDAE in Tampa, Florida. Brought to you in part on this Friday by Campus USA. Campus USA Credit Union. Put some star power into your financial life with Campus USA Credit Union. I used them to buy my car about 4 months ago. And boy, is it nice. And I can't thank them enough. I got a full point lower on my interest rate, courtesy of Campus USA compared to everybody else. So I actually bought the car in Tampa and I was driving up. I kept driving back up to Gainesville to get the check, go back and forth. So I can't thank Campus USA enough. So there we go with the Gators and Jack Caglione. I wanted to get to that with you out of the gate, you being a former Gator, and wanted to throw this your way too. I love stars. You love stars. Everybody may say that they cheer for the name on the front of the jersey. That's nice, but we watch because of the name on the back. Don't believe me? What's Iowa's women's basketball coach's name? Name me 3 other starters than Caitlin Clark, right? But we just had the most watched women's basketball game ever. And Monday night, we just had a game that had more consumption than any men's NBA Finals game, than any World Series game, then start going down the list of any game other than football-related games. So Caitlin Clark has done things that we have never seen in sport in terms of star power, gravity, what have you. Zach, it's tough for me as we head into a Final Four weekend to look at the most dominant program in the history of women's college basketball, UConn, and say that they're the third storyline in the Final Four behind Caitlin Clark and behind South Carolina's undefeated season. Then you have UConn, the most dominant thing in the history of women's college basketball. It's like, they got you wear that bronze medal. And NC State in both the men's and the women's. I guess you'd probably put NC State above Alabama in the men's in storyline because they got that big fat dude.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, Fat Albert or whatever his name is. I am so I look at both of them. And Zach, if we can get an Iowa South Carolina women's game on Sunday and get a UConn Purdue game on Monday. We had a great NIT championship game last night for what that's worth between Indiana State and Seton.
Yeah.
So, well, at least it's something. I mean, at least it was interesting. All of a sudden, Zach, we're shaping up to have a nice little weekend on our hands if we can get those matchups. UConn Purdue in the men's on Monday, and again, on Sunday, if we can get Iowa and South Carolina trying undefeated Gamecocks, all of those things. When you look at the Final Four from both perspectives, it's a Final Four weekend, the most entertaining star power Final Four weekend I can think in quite some time, and it's all because of the lady wearing the yellow and black.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I keep using Godzilla Kong because we have that in theaters right now. You don't want Godzilla Mickey Mouse, right? Like, it's not the same movie. You don't give the little guy a chance in that scenario. And I learned this many years with you in Jacksonville. Like, the little guy story is nice in the first couple of rounds, the Cinderella story, but then it gets old. Then you're like, all right, give me some chalk, give me some blood, give me some blue bloods, I should say, give me some of what I want to see. I think DJ Burns is a good enough story actually to carry NC State, obviously, as the lower seed. Ironically, Alabama, who is a much higher seed than NC State, doesn't bring as much to the conversation in terms of drama, in terms of star power. And that's not to say that Nate Oates and that, program hasn't done a great job. They have. But their thing is anybody can score. So I don't think that them getting through UConn somehow would help the storylines on the men's side. I think you're good either way, whether it's Zach Edey with, again, Purdue, the Boilermakers, or DJ Burns and NC State. You're good on that side of the bracket regardless because everybody loves the underdog. And again, it's not a big enough underdog. It's not FAU from last year to where nobody would pay attention.
Team that's won a title. You're right.
Right. And honestly, I love to see all the Jimmy V stuff coming back up. You're seeing that shared. We usually only do it once a year for the V Foundation and the speech. It's cool to kind of get some extra of Jimmy V's legacy, injected in. On the women's side, I mean, as much as I love the storyline of South Carolina trying to go undefeated, Dawn Staley's an amazing, maybe the best coach right now in college sports in terms of what she's doing with her program. And obviously, you got Paige Buckets. So you have a superstar with UConn, and Gino, what he's done with them historically is fantastic. I really feel like Caitlin Clark is carrying that, though. As much as I love the matchup with Angel Reese and LSU, as much as I love the matchup upcoming with UConn, like if it's UConn, South Carolina, despite all those great storylines, despite how good those two programs are and have been for a long, long time, I think it takes a big hit without Caitlin Clark. It's like the movies, right? Like if you take the leading actress or the leading actor out of any series of movies, right? Like Mark Hamill out of Star Wars in the first three. Well, the third one's not going to be as good, even though there's other great actors and actresses in it. So I think on that side, regardless of how good they have more good storylines, but they also rely more on their leading, which is Caitlin Clark, than I think the men's do.
Yeah, and I sit there and it's all about, like, again, we gravitate towards big names. When you look back on Final Fours and you talk about teams, you talk about insert player here's team. Oh, that was Kemba Walker's UConn team. Oh, that was Emeka Okafor's UConn team. Oh, those were Leitner's and Hurley's Duke teams. That's how you talk about it. You don't, Corey Brewer and Joakim Noah, right? Boom. Or vice versa, whatever of those two. You don't sit back and the Florida team that lost to Michigan State in the finals. Oh, Mike Miller. That's right. That's how we do things, right? So, I mean, this is always going to be Caitlin Clark's whatever going forward. And that's fine. I was trying to tell people that's okay. It's okay to take a step back and go, wait a second. Well, what are we going to do when she leaves? Who cares? Enjoy this while you got it, because it just doesn't exist like this. And the heavyweight matchup that we had Monday night, Zach, I made sure that we carried it on the radio more so than other things. I was worried that could get covered up by another game. I'm sitting there going, we got to find a way to get this on just because of what the magnitude of it is. And here we are on a Friday night. Zach, I'm not a young boy anymore, but I'd like to think that I am not done yet either. But I'm going to stay home and watch that tonight. I am. I'm going to make sure that I watch that game. After our Gator baseball game against Missouri, we're going to join that game in progress tonight on the radio station. I never would have thought of doing that 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago. So it's one of those things going into the weekend that star power matters. I do think having Zach Edey in the draw for the men's final would go a long way, because I think Purdue's the only. I think if UConn plays, well, UConn's going to skull drag Alabama. I think both.
Yeah.
I think both Final Four matchups on the men's side. I think Iowa's women will have trouble with UConn, but they'll beat them.
Agreed.
I think South Carolina is going to drill NC State.
Agreed.
And I have a tough time seeing Iowa beating South Carolina on the women's side. There's too many. You can throw too many people at them. Iowa has holes. South Carolina doesn't. That's why they're undefeated. On the men's side, I think Zach Edey, and look, Purdue's got two Mr. Basketballs from Indiana on them too. So this is a team, and when Purdue has struggled, it's because Edey does his thing and they can't hit shots. Well, they struggled the first 10 minutes against Tennessee, and then they start hitting shots. So it was Tennessee's a good basketball team with Dalton Connect. That was a good basketball team.
Oh, yeah.
Zach Edey looked like King Kong on Broadway in Manhattan, throwing cars around and like, what are you going to do? Well, Zach Edey's a guy, when he's on, you know what you do, Zach? You get to lose is what you get to do. And, I see comments coming in here. It's Andy Seth, would you take Zach Edey or Donna or Klingon? I'd take Zach Edey. You kidding me? I get 40. I get 35 and 17 every single game. He is, people try to talk about Shaq. No, he's more Yao Ming than he is Shaq. I
think DJ Burns is more Shaq than Zach Edey is.
Zach Edey has a little bit of touch. Zach Edey knows how to sell fouls underneath. And not that anybody's going to beat UConn, Zach, because I don't think anybody is. But the one team that has a chance to is Purdue, because they have the size in the front court to negate that like give and go high ball screen.
Yeah.
Zach Edey doesn't get in foul trouble either. So, as I watch those teams play, Purdue won't beat them, but they can beat them. And I think if UConn plays NC State, they'll beat them by 25 points.
I would agree with all of that mostly. I do think the most interesting part of the NC State matchup isn't the players, it's the officials, because we've seen Zach Edey be able to basically get whatever calls that are even close, understandably because of his size. You look at a guy like Burns, though, who's got weight obviously on him and can bump him around. They've let Burns play pretty freely this tournament. Yeah. He's been freight training through, whoever's been down low with them, taller guys, shorter guys, wider guys, like whatever you want to toss at him. He's moving them out of the way pretty easily, and they haven't called it. But on the flip side, they have called everything for Edey. So I'm interested to see how they officiate it, right? So you have two guys that are basically getting the calls, one because of his height, another because of his weight. And I'm interested to see, I would assume they would lean Edey in that scenario, and he would still get the calls over Burns. But I'm extremely interested to see how they officiate it out the gate, because that's a scenario where you mentioned Edey's got more of Yao Ming's game. Yao Ming didn't beat Shaq. So if Burns can move him around a little bit with that, the lower body strength and stuff, it can be an interesting matchup. But yeah, you'd be crazy not to lean Purdue. And I do agree that NC State will get crushed by UConn. So in terms of the final, you hope it's Purdue and UConn.
And as I watch this, Purdue so tight with what's happened the last few years. And, I was talking to somebody the other day. It's like they've lost in the first round the last second. They haven't lost in the first round. They lost to 15 seeded St. Peter's, but they lost to them in the Sweet 16. They had advanced to the tournament, right? They had early first round exits last year as a 16-1. You start to get shades of Virginia where they lost to Maryland, Baltimore County as a 16 and navigate their way and win a championship. And who was their toughest game that year when Virginia came back to win the national championship that next year? It was an overtime against Purdue in the Elite Eight. So maybe this is history repeating itself. The difference is that Virginia team had to go through Texas Tech in the finals. They'd have to go through what UConn is. Yeah,
it's a much different world.
The preeminent team in college basketball today is what they are. Questions coming in courtesy of our Titan MRI hotline via Facebook and also courtesy of Meldon Law. Let's see here. This comes from Brian. Said, have you ever been to Mackey Arena? I walked through it once as a teenager. Impressive basketball arena. A lot of respect for Purdue program. I love watching Glenn Robinson play there in the 90s. Yeah, I grew up in Indiana. 8 of the 10 biggest high school gyms in America.
Wow.
My buddy was a McDonald's All-American growing up. We grew up together. And there's a gym called Newcastle High School. It seats 12,000. And we had an all-star event there when we were seniors. And I think over the course of, was it 1, 2, 3, 4 games, the attendance was something like 42,200. I mean, it's what you see. You know, when you watch the movie Hoosiers at the end, and that's Mile High in the 50s. That's real life. Yeah, it's like that. And where they play the Final Four in the NIT last night, well, at Hinkle Fieldhouse, where Hoosiers was filmed. So
pretty cool.
It's one of those things I try to tell people. Basketball in Indiana is what football is in Texas.
No doubt.
It's what it is. It's what it is. So
didn't they add a basketball court in the airport there this last year too?
Well, you saw that in the All-Star game for the Pacers. Hey, what do you know, baby? How about that? Watch out, boys! I've got my secret.
We're watching out, all right.
No, I'm telling you, the Celtics. You don't want that smoke in the first round, Blobner. Hey, Heat fans, you don't want any of that smoke. You don't want any of that. All right, Tyrese Halliburton, the best point guard in the NBA. All right. Again, PodUp with Matthews in the morning, a service of Silverback Concrete. Silverback Concrete builds firm foundations for generations. You stand on it, we stand by it. Andy says, Seth, Caleb Dressel is the most dominant athlete in his sport in Gator history. He's world-class elite. He's great. There's swimmers and the divers and the track and field guys. You're right. They are.
Ben Shelton, too. I mean, there's some guys for sure. Guys.
But I'm telling you, most dominant male athlete ever now at the University of Florida is Jack Caglione. More than Tebow, more than anybody. Speaking of that, I want to pick your brain on a couple other things here. By the way, Kyle Crooks, voice of Gators women's basketball, voice of Gators softball. He's going to be joining us coming up here a little over 10 minutes from now. Florida State, Zach, signed a deal, doesn't like the deal. They and other teams are trying to sue their way out of the ACC. And a judge came out yesterday and said, tough titty, said to Kitty, you don't get to know. You signed a deal. You're not going anywhere unless you pay $500 million or whatever it is that their buyout clause is. So here you have Clemson and Florida State that are trying to sue their way out of the ACC. A judge says, no, you can't do it. So what do? I mean, you can try to sue again and you can try to sue again. The ACC, Zach, looks at this and says to themselves, we can't let them go. We're going to fight like hell for Clemson and Florida State, because if we don't, guess what? We're going to turn like the Pac-12. We can't let that happen. So they saw what happened to the Pac-12. They are going to go to the depths of hell and Hades or pick your dark underworld to make sure that those teams don't go anywhere. So what on earth is next for Florida State here and Clemson? What on earth? If you're the ACC? I mean, you won, but you got to do more. What do you see, and how do you see this shaking out for the Gators' little brother to the north and to the west?
You know, it's super interesting too, because we just got news. I think it was yesterday, in the last few days here, of the Super League starting to really form in the back behind the scenes with the commissioners and all these dinners and stuff. And it's like, oh my God, I'm so shocked that they're having these chats. I mean, I'm shocked we didn't find out about it sooner, if anything. So I think it's an interesting intersection when it comes to the ACC specifically. You mentioned the Pac-12's gone. The other three, big Power Fives, they're set, they're happy. But I think they were talking about something of like 80 teams in this Super League or whatever it is, a pretty big number. And the ACC would have to be a part of that. So I wonder how quickly that can come to fruition if it changes things for Florida State and Clemson, right? Because right now they're saying, we don't like the structure of our conference. Well, if the structure of college football changes, how much does that being in the ACC matter, right? And we've already seen the playoff structure change. So you can already argue that the biggest reason FSU wants out, which was being left out last year, that's already off the table. That won't ever happen again. You'll never have a 13-0 ACC champ be left out. Like, I don't care if 5 of their starters on each side of the ball get hurt. They'll still get in that scenario of a, 8-team playoff or whatever it'll end up being. So I do wonder how much the Noles wanting to be out of their conference, and Clemson as well, changes as the structure of college football, which is changing rapidly. Again, the playoff has already expanded 3 times in 5 years. I wonder if the Super League comes to fruition, how much them being in the ACC matters and how much these conferences will quote unquote work together. Because I think the ACC, although they have control or leverage over the schools in their conference right now, how much does that leverage go away as the other commissioners are like, listen, y'all want to be involved, you got to play ball, you got to do things the way we do it. And then at that point, I wonder how much, again, it even matters if they're even called the ACC. And the part of this, obviously, that we always forget when we have these conversations is how much the other sports don't really want anything to do with a super conference because it doesn't behoove them. The Pac-12, blowing up didn't help the college basketball, baseball, softball teams that are traveling throughout the week that have to go cross country. It's a lot harder on those other sports than it is football, which is once a week, with a little bit easier time to figure things out. So I think it'll be interesting to see more so how the bigger thing in college football changes and how quickly it changes. Because I think that'll actually happen quicker and easier than FSU or Clemson getting out of the conference they're in. And then it's a whole different conversation. So I think FSU and Clemson are going to continue to try to get out. I think if they really, really, really want to, they'll find a way. But that being said, I don't know how big of a deal it'll be as, again, college football is changing at a rapid rate regardless.
Some numbers for you, projections. By 2027, right now, the Big Ten payout per team is around $80 million. By 2027, it'll be $101 million. By 2027, the SEC will be $103 million, addition of Texas and Oklahoma. And of course, the Big Ten skyrocketing because of USC and UCLA. The ACC, $60 million, $65 million. You may say, we can make that up with donations and boosters and donations. Yeah, one year maybe you can sneak in an extra 25 million 1 year. But 40 million a year behind per year over 10 years, that's almost $500 million. So yeah, that's a big chunk of change. So my plan, if I were the ACC, I'd offer Notre Dame a double chair, give them $100 million and see if they'll become a full-time member in football. And then you stabilize that conference. All right. I know we got Kyle Crooks waiting in the wings really quick. What do you got coming up at WDAE on the J&Z show? I know you basically run that station down there now. What's coming up on Zac Blobner Sports Talk with Jay Retcher coming up over the course of the next few days here?
Yeah, in Tampa Bay right now, it's heavy Rays season. We're talking a lot of Major League Baseball. They start their first road trip of the year in Colorado later on today. So we'll take a look into that. The Lightning gearing up on the hockey side for a playoff run, and big win for them in Toronto 2 nights ago. With their backup goalie, they win again in Montreal last night. So they're one of, if not the hottest team in hockey. Nashville's playing really well too these days. So we'll keep a light eye on what's going on with the Bolts. And then any other moves with the Bucks, we're getting closer and closer to the draft. So Randy Gregory signing to the squad gave him some depth in the pass rush. We're always keeping an eye on what's going on with Tampa Bay sports across the spectrum. So those 3 things will be big. And then as you and I talked about, we got to get ready for the Final Four this weekend too.
Yeah. And it's exciting to announce that ESPN 98.1 FM 850 AM WRUF, I put it in motion yesterday, Bucks extension on the radio station. So the 5th year.
I put in a good word for you. I said that Harp guy's not too bad.
Yeah, I've done some things here that have upset some people, but that's one of the smartest things I did. Besides, there have been 2 brilliant things that have happened. The first was the station hiring me, and then me putting the Bucks on. So there we go. Zach, as always, man, it's a pleasure. Thanks for swinging by. Zac Blobner, former Florida Gator, host of the J&Z show, WDAE in Tampa. Thanks for getting up early with us here on this Friday. We appreciate you filling in for Shane Matthews and JC today. Thank you so much, man.
You're the man, Seth. Talk to you later. Go Gators.
All right, Kyle Crooks, voice of Gator softball, a voice of Gator women's basketball. He essentially is that tool that they sell on late night TV that can do everything. And he joins us next on PodUp with Matthews in the morning. Right here on the Shane Matthews, Freddie Weeby, PodUp with Matthews in the morning media network.
We want to take this moment to thank our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. Our premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Titan MRI, Gainesville's only locally owned and operated MRI facility. Meldon Law, the only official injury and accident law attorneys of the Florida Gators. Peachland Dental, Gator Nation's first choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte. QC Kinetics, live pain-free with QC Kinetics. Campus USA. Put some star power to work in your financial life with Campus USA Credit Union.
Comfort Temp. Comfort is our business. Peace of mind is our promise.
Dave & Buster's. Eat, drink, play, watch. Radware, your local provider of promotional products, uniforms, and apparel. Our gridiron sponsors are Auto ER, UF Bookstores, Silverback Concrete, Ruse Ogre State Farm Insurance, Radware, F45, Quality Plumbing. Our touchdown sponsors are Adams Ribs, Gator Dominoes, Celebrate Primary Care, Gator Bait Media, Okido America, Style Cuts, Ironwood Golf Course, Big Mills Cheesesteak, McDonald's of Gainesville, 84 Lumber, Dowling Signs, Baker's Sporting Goods, Silver Q Billiards and Sports Bar. If you're interested in promoting your business on the show, call Freddie at 352-284-3733. If you like what we're doing here, make sure to follow us and support the businesses that support us.
Hi there, this is Coach Steve Spurrier, and I want to let you know that by popular demand, Spurrier's Gridiron Grill's delicious brunch is now served in a premium buffet. You have spoken, we have listened, and we're now serving Gainesville's only elevated buffet, complete with an omelet station, ginger sage chicken sausage, shredded short rib, and of course our chicken and waffles. Plus, you can enjoy bottomless mimosas and Bloody Marys. So join us every Saturday and Sunday from 11 to 3 for the best brunch in town.
PodUp with Matthews in the morning. Seth Harp on Sports. With you here, filling in for Shane and JC on this Friday. You can follow me, harponsports.com, at Harp on Sports, social media platforms, my podcast, Harp on Sports, The Bar. Got a lot to get to in the final half of this show. A quick reminder, PodUp with Matthews in the morning is brought to you in part by Comfort Temp. Comfort Temp, comfort is their business. Peace of mind is the promise. Receive 1 year of their preventative maintenance free with every scheduled full home duct cleaning. Also, PodUp with Matthews in the morning, brought to you in part by Radware. Radware, family-owned business that prides itself in excellent customer service while providing quality and affordable promotional products and customized apparel. You want to be a part of the show? You got a question for Kyle? You got a question for myself? 3 ways to do it. Facebook Live, Meldon Law. Facebook Live question, courtesy of Meldon Law, the only official injury and accident law firm partner of the Florida Gators. Also, YouTube, Quality Plumbing, brought to you by, or the YouTube question, brought to you by Quality Plumbing, residential and commercial plumbing services, emergency repair since 1984. Their name says it all. They came in through a pinch with me about 2 months ago. My toilet blew up during that rainstorm. House smelled like death for a week, but thanks to them, it only lasted a week. And also, Titan MRI, Kyle, myself, joining you courtesy of the Titan MRI text line and hotline. All right, Kyle Crooks, we've got a lot of places we can start. First of all, thank you. Appreciate you swinging by and pinch hitting here this morning. I was talking with Zach about the Final Four, women's basketball, and I want to talk about, Rothrock and the softball program coming up here momentarily, because to me, they've got Oklahoma City written all over them this year. But you have seen Caitlin Clark. I have seen her. I was talking with Zach about this earlier. A lot of people say that the name on the front of the jersey means everything. So I said, okay, well then I would love you to tell me then, you can name college basketball players. You can name Gator players. It's fine. I want you to name who's Iowa's head coach. Name me 3 other starters on Iowa's team. Who's the most watched? There's more watched in the NBA Finals Monday night. The Angel Reese, it was stars at their highest level, and she put on a show for the ages. She Patrick Mahomes did, is what she did. And we haven't seen anything like it. You cover a lot of basketball. I grew up playing it, covering it in Indiana, been covering it more than any sport for 40 years. I think we have the opportunity to have 2 classics, Sunday and Monday, if we can get ourselves a South Carolina-Iowa national championship game. And if we can get ourselves, Kyle, a UConn-Purdue men's championship game. Weird that UConn women, Kyle, the most dominant program in the history of women's college basketball, is the 3rd storyline in the Final Four.
Yeah, it's interesting. What's funny is, because I cover SEC women's basketball with the Gators, to see how under the radar Dawn Staley and South Carolina have gone.
Yeah.
They're 36-0. I'm looking at it right now, Seth. They're 11.5-point favorites over NC State in the Final Four game. They're 11.5-point favorites. They'll probably cover going away. I think the next big ratings bonanza would be that Iowa-South Carolina game in a final. But nothing's going to touch the 12.3 million that saw that Elite Eight game because of, like you said, star power and storylines. Those two things drive ratings. Star power, storylines. Same thing in the NBA. Nobody's going to watch a random NBA game, but if it's LeBron against Steph, even though those two teams aren't the best out west, you're going to watch those two guys play on any given Saturday night, and there's a reason why that's prime time, even when those two teams are not the top teams out west. It's such a, watching Caitlin Clark play, it's amazing. It's Steph Curry-like. It's generational in the women's game. We saw how Steph Curry changed things in the men's game years ago when he came onto the scene, and now all of a sudden you got everybody pulling up from 35 feet, and I think that's going to change. You don't necessarily see a whole lot of that in the women's game. I think all of a sudden that's going to change. The generations coming up, you're going to have people pulling it from the logo and taking crazy bad shots. For Caitlin Clark, they're not bad shots, but you're going to see, I think, a shift in how women's basketball is played to where it might become even more appealing to the average viewer. I think both Final Fours are going to be a lot of fun. I think, can anybody knock off UConn on the men's side? I think if anything, Purdue with Zach Edey, that's the best shot. I don't think Alabama has the firepower to beat UConn on the men's side. I think the Final Four game on the women's side, UConn, Iowa, I think a lot of people, like you said, are downplaying Paige Beckers and UConn. They're a really solid team. Paige Beckers was the player on the women's side for a couple of years before her injury. And now all of a sudden she's lost that throne. And I'm sure she, in a way, takes that a little bit personally. So storylines galore. That's why you watch sports in general.
Yeah, and it's one of these things that I try to reiterate to people, and like our students at the station, that your target audience is now me. I'm finally in that age range between 25 and 54, man, disposable income. How do you grab my attention? That's who you're targeting. It takes a lot for me, Kyle, to say, you know what, I'm going to not do anything on a Friday night. I'm not going to go out. I'm not going to not do anything. I'm going to sit home and watch a women's college basketball game at 9:30 p.m. And that's what I'm going to do today. And, it takes, you need to be special and unique to get there. And she definitely has it. I think about this, Kyle, what it would mean to have both of those matchups again, to have Iowa and South Carolina on Sunday, followed by Purdue and UConn on Monday. I also cringe to think what it would mean to have, despite UConn, NC State in women's on Sunday, followed by NC State and Alabama on Monday. I got news for you. That would be the least watched championship game. I don't see any way Alabama. Do you see any way? I mean, I could see NC State maybe just because of Purdue's past history, but they don't match up well with Purdue. I don't see any way Alabama has anything for the front court of UConn. I don't see it.
No, I don't see it. I think Alabama is the highest scoring offense in the country. So if you hit a ton of threes, you can beat anybody on any day. But there's a reason that UConn might go down as one of the more dominant teams in the history of college basketball. And obviously, to bring this back to Gainesville and Gator Nation and all of that, Gator fans are going to be rooting heavily for, maybe rooting heavily for an SEC compadre in Alabama, because you don't want UConn to go back to back. You want Florida to have that moniker, right? So it's that game to me. I think the NC State game is going to be interesting. I think they've obviously hit lightning in a bottle, and that's such the fun thing. I'm talking about on the men's side. It's crazy. You have to differentiate because
they're both there.
Teams,
both UConn and NC State,
yeah. So, but it's a lot of fun to watch them play, and because they played, I believe, on the first day of the ACC tournament, they were an 11 seed to go through. They hit the buzzer beater, that last second shot to keep them alive in the ACC tournament, or else it's probably an NIT for them. It's crazy how much that one play goes from them going to a Final Four as opposed to them just scratching into an NIT. DJ Burns is one of the really cool storylines, I think, of the entire tournament on both sides. Big guy, he's captured the imagination of college basketball fans, and everybody everywhere. His personality, the way he plays the game, he's a heavier set guy. So, that kind of relates to certain people. I think NC State has the better chance of moving on to a championship game. Part of me actually kind of wants to see NC State in the championship game on the men's side. But I just don't see any way, because Purdue has a history of choking it up a little bit, as we know, in the NCAA tournament. But I feel like they've spelled those demons a little bit. But I'm excited to see DJ Burns play. That's kind of, for me, one of the biggest storylines on the men's side.
I can't think of a more, and again, I mentioned this to start the show. My mom's a Purdue grad, 29 of my family members, great uncles, aunts, cousins, all that, graduated from Purdue. I'm the lone kid that graduated from the school up in the Mitten. A couple of Hoosiers in there, Kyle. Both of my sisters are Butler Bulldogs, but it's one of those things that, it's fun watching that, because here I cover it and then I watch my whole entire family, extended family, go crazy about this. We're going, and it's weird. I should say it's weird. It's bizarre being away from that state like I've been for 20 years now. To forget, wait a second, my entire family, they're all from, that's right. You lose sight sometimes of what, that stuff is. I didn't want to say this though, because, it's part of the things that we got going on here with PodUp with Matthews in the morning. This day in sports history, because I was trying to find some things that I thought were big and relevant. And I think it's fascinating just because of what's going on. And again, this day in sports history, we got Peachland Dentistry, Gators Nation's #1 choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte and surrounding areas. Visit them at peachlanddental.com. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, 40 years ago today, broke Wilt Chamberlain's record.
40 years ago.
40 years ago today, Kareem broke Wilt's scoring record in the NBA. So there you go. I thought it was basketball centric. Speaking of everything that we've got going on, I brought this up earlier. You've been covering, the Gators for quite some time now, broadcasting, and one of my assignments for my students coming up here is I try to teach them talk show host and build topics and things of that nature, the legacies that these people are going to leave behind. Jack Caglione in baseball, what's a successful, when they write his legacy, what's it going to be? What's success? DJ Lagaway, what does he have to do as an incoming freshman to set a legacy? You cover somebody that comes in as a freshman. Of course, she's from the Hoosier State, so she's dominant, Kyle. I can't think, and you covered this team longer, that a freshman has come in and has kind of, I don't want to say put them on their back, because I don't know if you really want to say Rothrock's done that quite yet, Zach, but she has come in and all of a sudden this Gator team is 31-5. They look to be the favorites in the SEC, Kyle. This team looks like it's on pace to win 50 games. And, in just my 5 years at the university and 10 years around the softball program, covering it in some capacity, to me, it's the best team that they've had in a decade. And, win-loss, pitching wise, I don't know. They don't have the, I don't know if you think that Rothrock's there yet, or give the ball, okay, 2-1, we win this sucker. I don't know if we're there yet, but Kyle, I think the pedigree is there. And as a freshman, I don't want to use the word savior of the program, because their program was fine. They're going to Women's College World Series. This team looks like a team to me, Zach, that has what it takes to get back to Oklahoma City. Am I crazy?
I do. I think what's interesting, the way the transfer portal is now, I think they're one, and a lot of people would agree with this, they're one All-American pitcher portal addition away, adding to Keegan Rothrock and Ava Brown, who's the other stellar freshman, I think, from winning a national championship. I think this year it's very much an Oklahoma City team. And you never know, once you get in the dance, things happen. And, you mentioned this being the best Gator team in quite some time. I think it's the best offensive team in quite some time. The best team that I covered when I first got here was 2018. It was Kelly Barnhill in her prime, Alicia Ocasio, who I do some of the games with now on SEC Network. That was the 1-2 tandem. I think what's difficult about what this team's going to face, and it's a big series coming up this weekend. If you're in Gainesville, come out, take it on 5th-ranked LSU Saturday through Monday. That'll be a big litmus test here. LSU stumbled a little bit out of the gate in the SEC. They lost their first 2 SEC series after being ranked as high as 2nd in the country. It was pretty eye-popping. But this weekend, nonetheless, good pitching staff, great lineup in LSU. That'll be a big test. The lineup, if you look at the top 5, you got Falby, who's ultra consistent at the top. The speed, the on base, everything that you want. Skylar Wallace, you talk about some of the greatest Gators of all time. Now, this is only her 2nd year playing here, so I don't think you could put her in that mix. Even though now with the transfer portal, you kind of have to disregard a lot of that because that's so many of the players that come in are from the transfer portal. But she's probably one of the greatest athletes I've ever had a chance to broadcast. And Amanda Lorenz is in that mix. They're kind of 1A. She was hitting Seth at one point before one of the Kentucky games a week ago. We're talking late March. She was hitting 500. That's like opening weekend. You're 3 for 6 and you're hitting 500. And it's like, oh, well, that's a little wacky. Let's disregard that. She's hitting 500 in late March. She's slugging almost 1,000. She's absurd. And then you bring in Jocelyn Erickson, who Tim Walton had said is the most underrated player in the country, thinks that she's the best hitter in the lineup. She has over 50 RBI already, and a Corbiotis who's 2nd in the nation on base percentage. I can go on, and you're getting big years from players that hadn't necessarily had great years previous. Reagan Walsh, Katie Kistler. If you know the names, if you follow softball, everybody's having a really solid year, and there's not a lot of easy outs 1 through 9. And then you add Rothrock into the mix, and she had an up and down series against Mississippi State. But part of that is because they're the 2nd best offense in the SEC. They have some really good bats, not a lot of holes 1 through 9. Reminds you a lot of Kelly Barnhill in her later years. But, you don't want to crown anybody too early, but she's special. There's a reason that she was the National Gatorade Player of the Year. There's a reason why Ava Brown, who's right behind her in the rotation, was National Gatorade Player of the Year. And like Caglione is going to be one of the really great 2-way players, I think, in this program's history. And she hits better on the days that she pitches. She's just an ultimate competitor. So they're going to ride. I think you'll see some of the downside of riding 2 freshman pitchers when it comes to the postseason. But I think this lineup will do enough to overcome that at times. And at least, I hope, get them to Oklahoma City, at minimum, a super, and we'll see if the Gators can host a super this year. Right now, they're probably on the outside looking in for that.
I know softball had that ugly loss. It's a Friday night, right? Where built a big 6-run lead and lose it.
Yeah, it was a Thursday through Saturday.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday series. That's right.
Yeah.
Because we had it on the radio. And it was funny because not funny, but you sit there and you watch that, and then you watch. The men's basketball team figured this out as the season went on, that even though they were down in games, you said to yourself while you were watching them, like, yeah, but they can win this. Even though they may be down, basketball may be down 6 to 8 points in the Kentucky game, they can win this. They can come back and win this.
Mm-hmm.
Colorado game, they can come back and win this. Didn't, but can't. Softball, I've got that feeling now too, watching them. It's like, okay, it's 4-2 in the 5th. I'm like, they can still win this. Baseball, they can still win this. The women's basketball team was the exact opposite, Kyle, there late in the year. They'd be up 10 points at halftime. You're like, oh my God, can you hold on? Football was that way, right? They'd be up against LSU, up against Missouri. It's like, oh God, can they please hold on? So it's a football, and the women's basketball team was, oh my gosh, clock's going to strike midnight, Cinderella. Oh my God. Where the other sports are like, it's fine. We're fine. We're good.
Mm-hmm.
So I just look at that mindset and how men's basketball, softball and baseball, you feel like you're never out. I know Skylar Wallace, to me, is getting to that point, Kyle. I think Jack Caglione is already there. You know, people, Jack Tani, that's fine and that's cute. I look at him more like David Ortiz in his prime with the Boston Red Sox, or even Barry Bonds. And I know I was talking with Zach earlier about this, well, Jack got to win a got to win a championship. Barry Bonds never won a World Series, and I see him hitting. It doesn't matter. I mean, the dude hitting 600-foot home runs, and you're watching him, and you're like, oh my, why even pitching to him? And eventually, teams didn't. Where he had 60 intentional walks that one year. It's like, go down to first. I'm not even gonna deal with you anymore. I don't know if softball's a little bit different beast when it comes to that. We don't see near the intentional walks that we see in baseball for softball. But Kyle, I'm racking my brain this Missouri series. If I'm Missouri, I'm not pitching to him in any key situation. Why? And I said this earlier, that he is now, to me, more feared as a baseball player than Tim was as a football player. He's more feared as a baseball player, to me, from another opponent's perspective, than Corey Brewer or Joe Kim Noah were. But you've done baseball play-by-play for years. Kyle, why would you pitch to him?
Yeah.
Why? At this point, why would you pitch to him?
You look at the protection around him. That's the biggest thing. And that's how you want to create the lineups, right? You want to make it almost so that if you intentionally walk him, you can bury him with others around the lineup. I think the biggest thing about Cags this year is how well he's thrown the ball. Obviously, two-way star. You look at, it's funny. I was watching the game the other day, and he hit a home run. I think he hit it like 480 feet or something silly like that, right? And Jeff Cardozo was calling the games like, that's his 14th bomb of the year. I said, that's his 14th already. It just kind of popped up. Last year, 33 and 90. I'm looking at the numbers right now. He's hitting almost 400. You see that in softball in the women's game, 400. You're like, wow, that's impressive, but it's a little bit more common. But to see that in the baseball side of things, to hit 397, 14 homers, 30 RBI. But the thing that's impressed me, he's had 6 starts already. What is it? And he's 3-0, and he's pitching to a 2.18 ERA. He's almost chopped his ERA in half from 18 starts last year. I think the way they've needed him to pitch, because they've had some struggles, especially in the midweek. They're kind of rearranging who they want to start on Friday nights. We saw Brandon Neely in the starting rotation last weekend in the SEC series. So they're still trying to figure some things out. I think the mark of great players, Seth, is when you need them the most, they find a way to shine and stabilize things. And he's done a way to stabilize things in the rotation. And like you said, I don't think Missouri's going to pitch a whole lot to him. What I like to say is the intentional walk, just kind of pitch around him a little bit. And that's frustrating for stars. I know for Skylar, she gets mad to no end when they don't pitch to her. She's been hit a ton this year. And Tim Walton made the joke that one of these days she's going to go old school and she's going to charge. So the frustration of not being pitched to, I can see it when I talk to Skylar Wallace and sense the frustration from her. And I'm with you. 397, 14 homers, 30 RBI. I'm good.
Yep, have fun at first. If you can steal all the bases and score, fine. I'm not, and it's funny because they're talking about, we just can't throw him fastballs. You can't throw him anything. He in Wyatt Langford, it took him 50 games to get up to the bigs. When you get right down to it, took him 50 games to get up to the bigs. So you remove a guy that's the second fastest guy from last year's draft class to get to the bigs and start for a team, Kyle, that won the World Series last year.
You forget.
That he displaces guys that just won a World Series. And he's already up in the bigs. You take him off the team, and Jack Caglione still produces. I always try to tell people, I saw the stat the other day, the year that Babe Ruth hit 60 home runs and cleared the bases, Lou Gehrig had 168 RBI, even though Babe Ruth cleared the bases 60 times in front of him. So Caglione is in that realm now where guys, you have to pitch to whoever's in front of him. Because so it's just one of these situations now where I think he's just elevated everything. Really quick before we let you go, PodUp with Matthews in the morning. A couple more things in here. Brought to you in part by Tropical Smoothie. Live a healthier lifestyle with their bold, flavorful smoothies. Amazing food. Tropical Smoothie. When you eat better, you feel better. Quick Final Four predictions and championship predictions. Rapid fire. 60 seconds. Go.
All right, so I'm going to go with, I think South Carolina is going to win the national championship on the women's side. I think I had a chance, we played them in the SEC opener this year. I think, again, nobody's talking about them, but they have no holes. Some of the other, Iowa, you can look at, UConn on the women's side. You can look at, there's two teams with no holes. South Carolina on the women's side, UConn on the men's side. I'm going to go with the two best teams all year. And I'm going to go chalk. I think South Carolina and Dawn Staley pick up another. They've just been dominant. And UConn, same thing. They've just been dominant. I think they win it on the men's side. No surprises.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think Iowa and UConn is going to be a good game, but Iowa wins. And South Carolina throttles NC State. And then I think South Carolina beats Iowa by double digits, Kyle. And UConn, I think UConn beats Alabama by 10 to 15 points. I think Purdue beats NC State by 20. And then I think Purdue and UConn give us a classic Monday night.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yep.
I hope so. And I'm rooting for the Caitlin Clark, South Carolina. I just want to see Caitlin go up against South Carolina as her last kind of bid you adieu until she goes into the WNBA. That for me is what I'm rooting for. I want that Sunday night matchup between South Carolina and Caitlin Clark.
And the most important thing about all of this is Monday we have a doubleheader. LSU, Gator softball.
That's right.
7 p.m., followed by the national championship in men's basketball immediately following Florida's LSU softball game on Fridays or on Monday. So Monday, LSU, Gator softball, immediately followed by the national championship game. So quite the thing. And Kyle,
double dip on WRUF.
And I encourage everybody today, as we have two students that are gigantic Marlins fans, that were running their mouth to me about how awesome the Marlins are going to be this year. They're 0-8. So in order to reverse the curse, they are sacrificing 2 chickens on their program today. And by 2 chickens, I mean 2 family buckets of KFC. They have to eat them all during the course of the show. They have accepted this challenge. So you want to tune in to WRUF as Jose Tovar and Ethan Ive eat.
Oh, Ethan.
Ethan's going to eat an entire family bucket of chicken. And be like, from Major League, where Serrano gets a bucket of KFC, that's where it comes from. So those two are going to sacrifice an entire bucket, a family-sized bucket of KFC chicken today, Kyle. It is going to be something. How about that? So we're looking forward to that this afternoon. Kyle, thanks for hopping on with us this morning. Appreciate it very much. Again, Gator softball 3-game set with LSU this weekend. You can check out Kyle on the call of all of that action coming off a run rule of Stetson. Of course, we got Gator baseball all weekend long as they take on Missouri. We're weaving in Final Four games and getting as much in as possible. Again, ESPN Gainesville WRUF, over 515 live play-by-play games this calendar year alone, more than any other station in the country. So hope you enjoy everything that they do, and Kyle's a big part of that as well. Thanks, man. I appreciate it as always.
Appreciate you, Seth. Thanks so much.
All right, for Zac Blobner, Zach Rothrock, Kyle Crooks, I am Seth Harp. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. This has been PodUp with Matthews in the morning.